Good evening. This is the news tonight, your daily roundup of all that has happened in India and around the world. I'm Ishan Russell. And first, let's take a look at the headlines we're tracking today. The Prime Minister tells Parliament India lodged strong protest over bail to 2611 accused Zakir Rahman Lakhvi. Pakistan decides to detain Lakhvi for 3 more months. Economy expected to grow at 5.5% in the current fiscal, says the mid-term economic review tabled by the government in Parliament. The landmark goods and sales tax bill introduced in Parliament to be formally taken up for passage in the budget session. Elaborate polling and security preparations in place for the 5th and final phase of polling in Jammu and Kashmir and Jharkhand tomorrow. And Pakistan continues its crackdown on strongholds of the Taliban in areas bordering Afghanistan. Death warrants issued for 6 terrorists. Now, top story today, India strongly condemned Pakistan's decision to release 2611 accused Zakir Rahman Lakhvi. Prime Minister Narendra Modi told the Lok Sabha that as soon as news of Lakhvi's bail reached India, the government registered a strong protest with Pakistan. The Congress demanded the Prime Minister's statement on the matter.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi said in Lok Sabha on Friday that the bail granted to Zakir Rahman Lakhvi has come as a shock to all those who believe in humanity. He also informed the House that India had expressed its condemnation to Pakistan in strong words. The Prime Minister also said that post the Peshawar massacre, it was hoped that Pakistan would take a stronger approach against terrorism, but that has not happened.
पाकिस्तान से अपेक्षा की है कि अभी उनके यहाँ जो भयंकर घटना घटी है और बच्चों का जो भयंकर संहार हुआ, जितनी पीड़ा पाकिस्तान को हुई है, भारत को उससे रत्ती भर कम नहीं हुई है। और उसके तुरंत बाद इस प्रकार का रवैया ये दुनिया भर के मानवतावादी हर व्यक्ति के लिए बहुत बड़ा सदमा पहुंचाने वाला है।
External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj also made a statement in Lok Sabha. She said that the Indian High Commission in Pakistan had registered its strong protest as soon as it got to know the news.
जैसे ही इस्लामाबाद स्थित भारतीय उच्चायोग को जमानत दिए जाने का समाचार मिला, उन्होंने तुरंत ही पाकिस्तान के विदेश मंत्रालय को स्पष्ट शब्दों में हमारे रुख से अवगत करा दिया.
The matter was first raised by Congress MP Mallikarjun Kharge as soon as the House convened for the day. Kharge condemned Pakistan's actions and demanded a statement from the Prime Minister.
जब पूरे पाकिस्तान में वकीलों की हड़ताल हो रही थी, तो उस वक्त ये विषय रावलपिंडी एंटी टेररिस्ट कोर्ट में पेश करके बगैर बहस से अगर उनको बेल दिया जाता है और सरकार भी उधर अगर ध्यान नहीं देती है, तो इसको क्या कहना चाहिए कि प्रधानमंत्री का इसके बारे में क्या विचार है?
Members cutting across party lines condemned the bail granted to Lakhvi.
अदालत है और कैसी जेल है कि एक दहशतगर्द जेल में रहते हुए बाप बन जाता है, तो इससे अंदाजा होता है मैडम कि कितनी सीरियस है वहाँ की अदलिया हमको इंसाफ दिलाने के लिए.
The Lok Sabha also passed a resolution condemning bail granted to Lakhvi. The resolution asked the government to take every step to put pressure on Pakistan to bring the matter to a satisfactory conclusion. Shyam Sundar's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
Zakir Rahman Lakhvi will remain in jail for 3 more months. The decision of the Pakistan government came just a day after the 2611 key accused was granted bail by a court in the country. The Pakistan authorities have detained Lakhvi under Section 16 of the Maintenance of Public Order Act. The order of detention was handed over to the Adiala jail superintendent before Lakhvi's counsel could show his bail order to jail authorities. The government has also decided in principle to challenge the trial court's decision in the High Court. The appeal will be filed on Monday. The decision to detain Lakhvi comes even as India expressed outrage at the bail being granted to him. Now, India's GDP is expected to rise to 5.5% in the current fiscal on account of improving macroeconomic situation. The figures were at 4.7% last year. Now, this was highlighted in the mid-year economic review tabled by the Finance Ministry in Parliament today. The review also states that investment is yet to pick up significantly, raising concerns over the future of the big-ticket reforms to boost the economy.
Amid continuous disruptions in the winter session, the centre's economic reforms agenda seems to have taken a backseat. With list of pending bills growing, the government tabled the mid-year economic review in Parliament. It has projected 7 to 8% economic growth in the coming years. The report also pointed out that retail inflation is expected to be in the range of 5.1 to 5.8% in the next 5 quarters. Moreover, it pegged current account deficit at around 2% with slump in oil prices. The analysis also assumed that the Reserve Bank of India would maintain status quo in the interest rate till March 2015 and a stable outlook for rupee. In the report, the government has conceded that adhering to the fiscal deficit target of 4.1% of GDP is a major challenge. It also highlighted that tax revenue collections are below expectations and budgeted growth assumptions. However, Chief Economic Advisor to the Finance Ministry, Arvind Subramaniam, reiterated the government's commitment of achieving fiscal deficit target of 4.1% of the GDP for the current financial year. He suggested that the government will have to consider all measures, including spending cuts, to meet the target.
The reason for the revenue, for the numbers being not as bright as we expected, is partly due to the optimism in the projections, but it's also partly due to the fact that GDP growth was nominal GDP growth, which is the tax base, was actually lower than expected in the budget. We expect nominal GDP growth to be about 10 to 10.5%, whereas in the budget it was 13.4%. So certainly, if you're going to run short, I think we have to consider all measures.
As per the report, there are stalled projects to the tune of 18 lakh crore rupees. An estimated 60% of that is in infrastructure. The review pitched for speedy clearance of these projects. Kriti Mishra's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
Right, to help us understand what these economic survey figures really mean, we are joined by Shubhamoy Bhattacharya. He is the executive editor at the Financial Express. Thanks very much for coming in, Shubhamoy. First, very simply, it's good news on the international front, like low crude oil prices that seem to be giving positive cues. But as the review points out, without speeding up with the pending projects, we might not be able to utilize this moment. So where do our big challenges lie?
Well, obviously, it's getting the projects off the ground. If we look at what are the 4 things now, inflation is under control. It's the industrial production which is basically not in control in the sense that it has shrunk badly. Our current account deficit is reasonably under control and our foreign exchange reserves are stable. Right. So essentially, out of the 4 quadrants, it is basically industrial production where we have a problem. And that's exactly what the economic survey, the mid-year survey, is essentially pointing out.
All right, but on the positive side, growth is expected to even pick up to about 7 to 8% in terms of the overall GDP growth. So your comments and how achievable is that?
Well, that is something which is more in the sense of an optimism. Because we would be expecting growth to pick up. But for this fiscal, it is definitely not going to be anywhere more than 5.5%. Because most of the fiscal is already done. And the industrial production figures we already seen. Agriculture hasn't done well in Kharif. The Rabi crop isn't expected to be astoundingly great. So essentially, we are not looking at anything more than 5.5% for this year. For next year, it is largely a predicate of how the interest rates move and how the policy issues regarding the major projects pan out. So to expect something like 7% is I think, a bit too optimistic. But yeah, going above 6% should be reasonably okay. But also we have to remember that the export sector will actually be a laggard. So there has to be some sector which has to make up for the weakness in exports.
All right. Now, without any major social spending, like the social sector spending on the anvil and cheaper crude, is the fiscal deficit target really achievable?
That, I think, would be more or less close to the 4.1% that has been talked about should be achievable. The reason for that is the government essentially will go through with disinvestment because it will be using sort of the OFS route to take out money from institutions like LIC to make to come close to the disinvestment target. The oil import bill isn't too high. So essentially with that and also the telecom spectrum auction coming through, the non-tax revenue is going to be good. The problem is about the tax revenue, but well, most governments know ways to bring it closer to the target. So essentially they could be much more closer to the target. 4.1% is something which the government now it's in a situation where they say we have a hard fiscal target, which means that target one set has to be met, and they will be meeting it.
All right, we'll leave it there, Sri Boboy. Thanks very much for coming in and providing those inputs to us and your analysis on this. But let's move on now, because staying with news related to the economy, the much-awaited GST, that's the Goods and Services Bill, which provides for an overhaul of the taxation system, was introduced in the Lok Sabha today. The government said concerns of all the states have been taken care of and they would benefit from the win-win measure. Now, introducing the bill, which was cleared by the Cabinet on Wednesday, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley said states would be compensated on account of GST and the first installment would be made before March 31st next year. A new additional tax at the rate of 1% will be levied on interstate trade of goods for the first 2 years as an interim measure to shore up state finances. The GST Council will have 2/3 representation from states and 1/3 from the centre. The Council will require at least 3/4 majority to implement any decision. The new tax regime proposes to do away with indirect taxes such as state VAT, central sales tax, excise tax, service tax and entry taxes. It will reduce the cost of compliance and convert India into one single common market.
The present bill provides for petroleum being included within the constitutional amendment, but the date on which petroleum can be taxed under GST will be decided by the GST Council.
In the Rajya Sabha, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley said the government would formally take up the bill and seek to pass it in the next session of Parliament. He said that concerns of all states have been taken care of in the GST bill.
During the debate on appropriation bill in Rajya Sabha, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley answered some of the concerns raised by the opposition members over GST bill. Finance Minister informed the House that all views have been taken on board before bringing in the major tax reform bill.
We have provided more than an adequate protection to all states, that in the initial years, any loss of revenue as far as any state is concerned will be compensated by the sector.
Earlier, during the debate on appropriation bill, members from various parties raised the issue of GST bill.
सबसे खतरनाक ये चीज है कि आप जो बोर्ड बना रहे हैं, जिस बोर्ड के सामने राज्य अपील करेंगे अपनी, वो बोर्ड में आपने केंद्र के ही सब प्रतिनिधि नियुक्त कर लिए हैं, तो राज्यों के अधिकारों में कटौती ना हो, इस पे भी मैं आपकी गारंटी चाहता हूं.
Jaitley said the government would formally take up the bill and seek to pass it in the next session of Parliament. The current session ends on Tuesday next week.
I do not intend to pass it in this session.
The Constitution Amendment Bill on GST was approved by the Cabinet on Wednesday. Arun Jaitley said the government would give constitutional assurance in terms of compensating the possible losses incurred by the states. Vishal Dahiya, Rajya Sabha TV, Delhi.
Now, over 5 crore Provident Fund subscribers governed by the EPFO will get an 8.75% interest on their deposits for the current fiscal. The Finance Ministry has ratified the rate for 2014-2015. The decision to retain the interest payout at this level was taken by the Central Board of Trustees of the Employees Provident Fund Organisation. As per the practice, EPFO trustees' decision gets implemented after the concurrence of the Finance Ministry. Following the ratification, the decision would now be notified by the Labour Ministry as also by the Income Tax Department. Well, time for a very quick break right now, but coming up on the other side, the Rajya Sabha has been disrupted for the 5th consecutive day over the conversion row. More on that on the other side. Welcome back here with the news tonight. Well, Rajya Sabha proceedings were disrupted for the fifth successive day on Friday as the opposition refused to back down on its demand for the Prime Minister's statement on forced religious conversions in the country. But the government also sent out a loud and clear message that it would not concede to the opposition's demand. The stalemate forced two adjournments in the pre-lunch session.
Raising the issue of forced religious conversions in Rajya Sabha, leader of opposition in the House, Ghulam Nabi Azad, said the reports transcended national boundaries and so the assurances of the Prime Minister was necessary to douse a communal flare-up in the country.
They are watching this religious conversion very keenly. उन्होंने ही दर्द दिया है, उन्हीं को ही दवा देना होगी, क्योंकि उन्होंने ही भारत की जनता को कहा है कि मैं आंसरेबल हूं, मुझे ताकत दे दो, मुझे शक्ति दे दो, उन्हीं को विश्वास देना होगा भारत की जनता को.
Other opposition members soon joined the chorus.
The opposition a few minutes ago has clearly outlined the stand of what the mood of the House is, what the 140 members is. The stance is very clear. The opposition wants a discussion on this. Why is the Prime Minister shying away? He should come here and take part in the debate.
Despite the clamour for the Prime Minister's reply, the government stood firm on its ground that the reply to the discussion would be given by the Union Home Minister. The government was resolute that the opposition cannot set the terms for the discussion.
आपने कहा इस पे जवाब होना चाहिए, हमने कहा आपको सूद ब्याज के साथ जवाब देंगे. आपको समस्या क्या है? अब आप कहेंगे जवाब कौन देगा? ये हमें तय करना है. आप तय नहीं करेंगे कि जवाब कौन देगा. आप तय करेंगे कि आपका स्पीकर कौन होगा, आपकी पार्टी से बोलेगा कौन. ये आप तय करेंगे. हम तय करेंगे कि जवाब कौन देगा.
The chairman also pointed out that it was established practice to seek a response from the designated minister, but also asserted that if the reply fails to satisfy the opposition, then other ways could be employed according to rules.
But why are we jumping that stage? We are at stage one, that a debate is to take place and a reply is to be given. After that, if you are not satisfied with the reply, then we come to the next stage.
However, the proceedings were adjourned once again.
House is adjourned till 2:30 p.m.
Appropriation bill and private members' business was taken up in the second half in Rajya Sabha. However, with both government and opposition not willing to budge from their respective stand, there are slim chances of smooth functioning of the upper house in the remaining 2 days of the winter session. With camera person Siddharth and Kriti Mishra, Vishal Dahiya, Rajya Sabha TV, Delhi.
Well, some election news now, and ahead of the fifth and final phase of polling in Jammu and Kashmir and Jharkhand tomorrow, preparations have been on top gear through the day today. Readiness extends to poll parties reaching to interior areas as well as persistent security threat in both states.
In Jharkhand, moving officials and equipment takes on a special face this time. Indian Air Force helicopters have transported polling personnel for 96 booths in several assembly segments for the polling on Saturday. Elaborate security measures to ensure zero disturbance to the poll process.
सेंसिटिविटी प्रोफाइल के अनुरूप हमारा 233 के आसपास अति संवेदनशील है और 300 से ऊपर के बूथ हमारे संवेदनशील हैं, बाकी सब सामान्य हैं. टोटल हमारे यहाँ 969 पोलिंग स्टेशन हैं. तो हम लोगों ने हेलीकॉप्टर से डिस्पैच किया है, जो है वो हेलीकॉप्टर से ही जाएंगे और हेलीकॉप्टर से वापस आएंगे. बाकी सभी मतदान दलों को हम लोगों ने गाड़ियाँ उपलब्ध कराई हैं, जो कि एक नियत स्थान तक गाड़ी से जाएंगे और उसके आवश्यक होगा उसके आगे पैदल.
Across the 16 constituencies, over 22,000 polling personnel have taken positions. 16 assembly segments across 5 districts go to polls in the fifth phase of voting here. Some 36.9 lakh voters will decide the fate of 208 candidates in the fray. 4,448 polling stations are in place. In Jammu and Kashmir, the process of setting up EVMs and control units is complete at over 2,400 polling stations, besides, of course, the plethora of logistic needs that crop up. The remaining 20 constituencies of Jammu and Kashmir go to polls in the fifth phase. Some 18.2 lakh voters are eligible to cast their franchise. 213 candidates are contesting for 20 seats. 2,366 main and 25 auxiliary polling centres have been set up overall. There's also the security factor, a big element of elections in the backdrop of the boycott call and threat of militant violence in the state. Several areas going to polls this time adjoin the international border that has borne the brunt of firing and shelling from Pakistan. Special precautions are in place.
हमने पोलिंग स्टेशंस को 3 हिस्सों में बांटा हुआ है, जिसमें हाइपर सेंसिटिव और नॉर्मल। और हाइपर सेंसिटिव पोलिंग स्टेशंस पे जो है हम 2 सेक्शंस लगा रहे हैं पैरामिलिट्री फोर्सेस की, सीआरपीएफ की, और 1.5 सेक्शन लगा रहे हैं हम सेंसिटिव पे और 1 सेक्शन लगा रहे हैं हम नॉर्मल पोलिंग स्टेशंस के ऊपर।
Saturday's voting will complete the poll process that began on the 25th of November. From there, it will be over to the counting centres on the 23rd of December. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Well, President Pranab Mukherjee has been discharged from the Army Research and Referral Hospital in New Delhi. The hospital authorities said the president was feeling fine. The president had been admitted to the Army Hospital on the 13th of December after complaining of uneasiness and stomach pain. He later underwent angioplasty. And Congress President Sonia Gandhi is said to be stable and recovering at the Gangaram Hospital. She was hospitalized yesterday for lower respiratory tract infection. Now, according to the morning health bulletin released by the hospital, her condition is improving. A team of doctors is closely monitoring her health. Now, North India continues to battle severe cold and foggy conditions, which has paralysed normal life over the last few days. The dip in mercury has impacted rail and air traffic and has been disrupted, and delays have been reported in a lot of places.
Dense fog enveloped several parts of North India on Friday, with temperatures dipping several notches below normal. Cold conditions prevailed at several places in the national capital, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana and parts of Punjab. Nearly 90 trains were delayed or rescheduled from Delhi because of foggy conditions. Train services from Kanpur were badly hit. The fog also disrupted flight schedules, with several getting delayed.
बहुत धुंध पै रही है, गाड़ी देखदा कख नहीं गा, बड़ी मुश्किल आउंदी आ, माल दूजे दिन माल पचाईदा व्यापारी दा ते बहुत ही मुश्किल आउंदी आ, ना गड्डी रोड ते खड़ी कर सकदे किते भी धुंध दे विच कोई नुकसान हो जू किसे दा।
ठंड तो बहुत है यहाँ कानपुर सेंट्रल में,
और कितनी दिक्कतें हो रही हैं?
दिक्कतें बहुत हैं, यहाँ कोई इंतजाम नहीं है ठंड के लिए, और हम लोग ठिठुर रहे हैं, रात भर यहाँ गाड़ियाँ भी लेट जा रही हैं और ठंड के मारे हम लोग परेशान हैं। यहाँ कोई इंतजाम नहीं था अपने का, ना लकड़ी का ना कोई चीज़ का।
The mercury dropped to 7.4 degrees Celsius in the capital, 1 degree below the season's average. The Delhi High Court has asked the Shelter Improvement Board to identify buildings and seek help from various agencies to make available night shelter space for the homeless. Kanpur recorded this season's lowest minimum temperature, 4.2 degrees Celsius. Night temperatures also fell in Lucknow, Gorakhpur, Allahabad and Varanasi. Cold conditions are expected to intensify as temperatures in hilly areas have dipped below 0 degrees Celsius. Places like Kufri, Manali, Kullu and other tourist spots are witnessing minus temperatures for the last few days. But there was slight respite from the bone-chilling conditions in Leh and Kargil, as the night temperatures in these places rose by 2 degrees. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now all the other national news and updates nationwide. The Haryana government has ordered a probe into the reports of missing files of Robert Vadra DLF land deal. An RTI query filed by IAS officer Ashok Khemka found that 2 pages of a file pertaining to the land deal were missing. An internal inquiry has been instituted by the State Chief Secretary. West Bengal Transport Minister Madan Mitra has been remanded for 13-day jail custody in relation to the multi-crore Sharda chit fund scam. Mitra will be in remand till the 2nd of January next year. Court said that Mitra was holding a high position and might tamper with evidence if released on bail. He was charged with conspiracy and misappropriation of funds. The BJP has suspended Rajasthan MLA Prahlad Gunjal from the party for his supposed use of abusive language against a medical officer. Gunjal supposedly threatened Chief Medical Officer R.N. Yadav over the phone for not allowing the transfer of a BJP worker's relative on Thursday. He, however, has sent a letter of apology to the BJP state president. Well, Bangladesh President Abdul Hamid, who is on a 6-day official visit to India, met with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi today in Delhi. The two leaders discussed bilateral ties as well as the land deal between India and Bangladesh. Prime Minister Modi assured the Bangladeshi president that India is willing to be a catalytic agent to boost cooperation in the region. He also added that India's Act East policy starts with Dhaka. Earlier in the day, the Bangladeshi Vice President also met Indian Vice President Mohammad Hamid Ansari and External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj. Well, news from across the border, where the crackdown on terrorists continues in Pakistan. At least 32 militants were killed by the army near the Afghan border on Friday. With this, the number of militants killed has gone up to 89. Meanwhile, the Pakistan military chief has signed death warrants for 6 terrorists who were on death row. This after Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif decided to end the moratorium on death penalty in terror-related cases.
Pakistan putting its foot down by taking the fight against terrorism to a new level. In yet another combing operation by the army, 32 Taliban militants were killed near the Afghan border in Khyber Valley on Friday.
Law of society was looking as bowing down before the terrorists. And the first message that the society would be communicated is that now none is above the law, none is beyond the law, and none can escape the law.
The Pakistan military chief also signed the death warrants for 6 militants. Security officials said all of them were convicted by a military court and were awaiting execution.
We have always noticed that whenever there is a declaration that he is going to be hanged, you know, there is always possibility of a resentment and also reaction.
Meanwhile, thousands of Pakistanis held candlelight vigils and protests as they mourned the death of several school children in Peshawar on Tuesday. It has taken something as awful as an attack on innocent children for Pakistan to sit up and adopt a tough stance against terrorism. Since 2007, terrorists have killed over 2,000 people in Pakistan. In 2013 alone, that number stands over 3,000. How it tackles the issue from here on will make all the difference. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And now all the sports news in Sports Beat. India ended day 3 of the ongoing second test against Australia for 71-1 in their second innings, with Shikhar Dhawan batting on 26 and Cheteshwar Pujara not out at 15. India are now 26 runs behind. Earlier in the day, Australia finished their innings at 505 all-out with a lead of 97 runs. The Australian piled 258 runs for the last 4 wickets, with Smith smashing an impressive 133. Olympic bronze medalist Saina Nehwal stormed into the semi-finals of the BWF World Super Series final, clinching a pulsating 3-game thriller against Ba Yeonju of Korea. The world number 4 Indian, a 2011 finalist, bounced back from a game down to notch up the win 15-21, 21-7, 21-17. Kerala Blasters FC and Atletico de Kolkata will play the mega final of the Indian Super League 2014 at the D.Y. Patil Stadium in Mumbai tomorrow. Kolkata scraped through their semi-final clash with FC Goa, needing penalties to decide the tie. The Sachin Tendulkar co-owned Kerala Blasters made it to the semis by beating Chennai and FC 4-3 on aggregate. Well, that's the news tonight. Good night.